All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. Thank you for giving up a part of your evening. We want to honor your time, and so like I said, we will be finished this process by 7:15 at the latest. Basically, really, it depends on the conversation that we share together and any questions that you might have as a part of the process. Just to share with you what we hope to accomplish this evening, you are going to perhaps see some things and hear some things, some of which you already have heard before. Some are going to be new for you this evening. We're going to share in some conversation. I'm going to ask you kind of some questions as you think about what is important about Faith Church as we continue to move forward and things like that. And then also we're going to see a video together. We're going to hear a story of how at least one family in our congregation is processing through this information and is allowing God to speak to their lives through this process. And then, like I said, we're going to ask you to ask me some questions, and if I don't have the answers for you tonight, we will work on getting back to you, and I'll get those answers for you. And really, it's about laying the foundation for what God is going to continue to do over the next couple of weeks in us as individuals and in us as families, but also in us as a congregation. So to start out our time together, I just want us to pray. So let's pray. God, I thank you for the women and men who have chosen to spend a part of their evening here tonight. I thank you that they've made the commitment because of their love for you and for your church to be here, in spite of days that have been filled with school and work and trying to get dinner around and all of that before making it here tonight. And I just pray that you would honor the effort that they've made by being here. And that you would honor it by making the next hour or so fruitful in their lives, fruitful for our continued growth as a congregation, and fruitful for this process. As we undertake this journey together, we just ask that you would continue to speak, that you would guide us, that you would stretch us, and that you would use even this process to make us more and more into the women and men that you long for us to be, that we might follow Jesus faithfully into the future that he has in store for us and for Faith Church. So again, we just ask that you would be with us this evening. In his name, amen. Well, by way of introduction, two folks have the responsibility as a part of this capital campaign process to plan and organize these meetings that we're having that we've called our Journey Marker events. And those two persons who've overseen everything that's gone into tonight and Thursday and Saturday are Ben McBeck and Jeremy Ramsey. So first of all, just want to say thank you to Jeremy and Ben for pulling everything together. And we're going to actually get started by asking you two questions. And I'm going to give you a moment or two to think about your answers to those questions. And then Jeremy and Ben are going to be walking around with a couple of microphones. And if you feel comfortable, just sharing your answer to those questions out loud. The first question that I wanted to ask you is, when you think about what is going on at Faith Church, what is it that excites you most? So just think about that, and then we'll ask you to share your response to that. Sydney, you have an answer. Sydney's excited. Hi, buddy. What is it that excites you most about what's going on at Faith Church? Somebody has an answer. If you'll just raise your hand, and one of the guys will bring you a microphone to share.
Am I on? All right. I enjoy all the things that my kids are getting involved in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly.
I just truly enjoy and am so excited about the energy and the warmth and the excitement that's here. the Holy Spirit is here, and it's really just wonderful to see. I didn't think the place could be even more alive, and it keeps getting more and more and more of that. So.
Any other thoughts about what excites you most about Faith Church?
Hi, my name is Jason Cott. I think the two things that excite me most about Faith Church are the children's ministry. I have three boys, 7th grade, 5th grade, and 2nd grade, and Faith has been such a blessing in their lives. And the other thing is the Saturday service. The Saturday service has had a tremendous impact on my family, and it's just a very exciting time to be here at Faith.
Thank you.
I'd like to ditto that with the children's ministry and the youth program. I shared with PL yesterday that Saturday night after the service and when people were starting to mill around and starting to mill around in fellowship, and one of the things was the stones out in the narthex about the prayer the prayer stones. And one of the kids, I saw one of these kids, 5th grade, 4th grade, something like that, just start taking the stones and start praying over them, and put them in the bucket there. And I thought that was really cool. It was I wish I could have videotaped it and shared with everyone. It's no, it's like a God moment. So it's the children.
Thanks, Mike.
Hello, my name's Jim Weaver. Each time I enter the church, whether it be to worship or to help in any way that I can, I'm always overcome by the love and the compassion of all the members of the church and everyone I meet when I enter the doors. It's such a wonderful place to be.
My name's Lisa Swoyer, and I just want to say the small groups have been amazing. And just being able to get tied in to a group and having been in various small groups, it's a wonderful experience. And that's been awesome.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, my name's Kristen Alba. I also am going to echo Mr. Cott's remarks about both the children's ministry that I'm actually involved in teaching. One of the things that's so great is that my impact and influence overlaps in my Foothills school district, not just in when I substitute teach, because I work as a substitute teacher, but also coaching. Coach Cott and I are two of maybe one or two coaches that I know of that actually pray with their players. So we have influence from our church out into our community, which is one of the things that I hope that we stay really focused on is our service to the community. Our service day is probably one of my favorite things with the kids. And my family absolutely loves coming. And at Club Pins, I wanted to say, way to go, Mike, and the people that are involved in Club Pins and Phil, because that's just working with adolescent kids as well is really a great place for them to kind of connect and work out things that they may not normally work out.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Any other?
Hey there, I'm Deb. One of the things that excites me so much about Faith is that every time I'm here, there's a sense of anticipation and excitement, from the folks that are coming in the doors, from the folks that are serving on the different teams. From the minute that people walk in here, there's just a sense of anticipation, of meeting with God and finding out what His plan is, and it just is so humbling.
Thank you. Second question that I want to ask you is not just what's already going on that excites you, but looking as we continue to take this journey into the future, If you, excuse me, if you would think about 3 things that you would hope Faith Church would be known for, what are 3 things that you would hope that we as a congregation would be known for? So take a moment to think about that, and then if you have some thoughts, raise your hand. If Faith Church were known for 3 things, what would you hope that they would be?
I would say number 1, how we love. Number 2, how we live. And how we lift Jesus Christ.
Okay, thank you, Sherry.
I think this kind of ties in with your first question, because one of the things that I've experienced is an easy accessibility to a great cross-section of different people, different programs, and I think from the community looking in, for them to be able to see that and see how accessible it is to get involved in Faith Church, and that it's not some stoic, doing nothing type of congregation, that it's very easy to get involved. That's one of the things that I've found.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Yeah, yeah. I've gone through a lot of pastors. Yeah.
I think it was already implied. Philip Allen, Director of Student Ministries here. One of the things is that we should be known for our service, and I know you implied that, but at the same time we should be known for our service. Jesus says, if you love me, feed my sheep, and we need to feed his sheep, and that part of that is the actual feeding. And I'm not just saying we should just do a food program, but wherever we can serve in the physical acts of love. As much as talk about love and experience love, we need to do that as well, serve it.
Any other thoughts? What are the 3 things that you would hope Faith Church should be known for?
I would think that we would want to be the church that lost people find Jesus at. That's our top priority. So I think that's kind of what I would want us to do going in the future.
Thanks, Scott. Oops. Now I think you turned it off, maybe. There we go.
How do I concentrate on creating a list of 3 things? And as I kind of mill them around in my head, I'm thinking our generosity financially to the community, I think is huge. I think that makes an impact tremendously in people's lives, especially people that are hurting, people that are struggling. It seems like when the church recognizes a need financially with a family or even individuals, they rush in to fill that need. And I think that's huge. in reaching out to people. Secondly, now I'm losing it. Secondly, I think is our service to the community. Several people tonight have commented on that, as in our day of service, and I think that's huge too, in making an impact in the community, in reaching out to people. And then the third thing I think I'd like for Faith is, in today's world, it seems like our faith is constantly under attack, not only here in our own country, but around the world. And I think I would want for Faith to be known as a church that takes a stand not only in their own community, but takes a stand for others worldwide. And those are the three things that I'd want for Faith.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on. Hopefully, if you have other thoughts about that, you'll have some time later maybe to share even more. But I want you to take note of all of the answers that you came up with for what excites you most about Faith Church, and for all of the answers that you came up with for what you would hope Faith Church would be known for. None of them had anything to do with a building. And that's exactly as it should be. And you say, well, then why are we here, Pastor Larry? One of the things that you're going to hear from me again and again throughout this process, and as long as I'm your pastor, is that this building or that building or some building that comes along down the road 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now as we continue to grow should never be what excites us most as a congregation, and should never be what we're most known for in the communities in which we live. The moment that the building that we already occupy, or that the building that we're starting to look toward building, becomes our vision, we immediately lose the point. And I think that we step out of God's will for our lives as a church. Now, that being said, I believe that a building can be one of the tools that God uses to allow us to do the kinds of things that are already exciting you. Welcoming more and more people. Being a mission outpost for reaching out to our community. Being a place where students and children and adults can come, learn, and come to know Jesus in worship, in Hands-On Bible Club, in Club Fins, in FSM, in our small groups, in our outreach. And the building can become a tool, and I believe will be a tool by which God allows us to achieve the things that we're hoping to be known for as a congregation. And so I loved your answers, because I would have been much more concerned if many of us would have said, I'm really excited that we're building a building so that we have more space for worship. Or I'm really excited because we're building this building so that our kids have some place to gather. Because we're not building a building for us. We're building a building for those who aren't yet here. We're building a building so that God can use us to achieve His purposes in our communities. But the reality is, we believe that the best way to fulfill what God wants for us as a congregation is to expand our facilities. And so we're just going to turn our attention just for a couple of minutes for me to talk to you about the process. And this may be not new for some of you. It may be new for others of you. But beginning all the way back in 2010, when I became the pastor here, very early on, Mike, as the facilities manager, and I began talking about the process by which we would start to ascertain what our needs are for our facility as a church. And in 2011, the facilities design team was formed. And over a period of quite a few months, the facilities design team met, and they met not only amongst themselves, but they met with all of the ministry leaders in the various areas of work that we have as a congregation. And they asked them some similar kinds of questions. They said, what is it about our facilities currently that is holding you back from doing what you believe God is calling you to do? And if money were no object, what kind of facilities would you need in order to fulfill the vision that you believe God is calling you to do? And what do we need to keep in mind as we're going through a process of thinking about and praying through building needs? And over that process, we met with those ministry leaders, we met with our church council leadership, and we eventually began meeting with Lundy Construction, whom we had decided was going to be our partner for this part of the process. And over that course of conversation, we came up with 4 primary needs for us as a congregation. That we were facing some restriction in the area of contemporary worship space. As our 9:45 service continued to grow, we had recognized that quickly we were outgrowing our sanctuary, and even now that we have Faith Cafe, we're recognizing that we're quickly outgrowing our space for contemporary worship, even in Faith Cafe. This Sunday in Faith Cafe, we had to continue to set up chairs, and we had 98 people worshiping in Faith Cafe on Sunday morning. We had another 58 people worshiping in Faith Cafe on Saturday night. So in one weekend, we had 156 folks worshiping in a video venue that we call Faith Cafe. That's a congregation that is probably twice as large as 90% of all United Methodist churches in the United States are worshiping in Faith Cafe. So we know that contemporary worship space continues to be one of our needs. Not only the space physically for people to worship, but also we recognize that this was built as a traditional worship sanctuary. This was not built to house or to host contemporary worship. And so while we continue to do the best that we can, it's not built to lead the kind of worship that is our primary area of growth as a congregation. Second area that we determined was a big need was obviously our children's ministry space. In the past couple of years, in the past 7 years to be exact, our children's ministry has grown from an average of 15 to 20 kids on a weekend to this past weekend we had 115 children in Hands on Bible Club between Saturday night and Sunday morning. And on an average weekend, we're averaging just over 100 kids, I believe. So we know that children's ministry space is at a premium and is an area that we need more facilities. Not only the actual rooms, while we have a couple of more rooms that aren't used at this point on Sunday morning, we have no larger space where kids can gather as a large group to learn how to worship in ways that are appropriate for kids, as well as meeting in their small group rooms for their individual classrooms. So that's a second area. A third area has to do with our student ministries, our growing student ministries, and the need for fellowship and recreation space. While our fellowship hall, also known as Faith Cafe, is great, it's really not big enough to hold 45 or 50 middle schoolers who can't go out because it's the middle of winter and who are looking for a place and a way to blow off some of the steam that they've all been holding in as they've been at school all day long. We need additional recreation space not only for our student ministries, but for the possibility of expanding our ministries and doing just what we talked about, reaching out to our community. I know that our school district is constantly looking for places for teams to have practices and trying to fit practices, for instance, especially for basketball, because I know part of our building plan involves some a space big enough for a full-size basketball court. I know a lot of our school basketball teams are dying for places to be able to meet on a regular basis because the spaces in the schools just fill up so quickly. And also fellowship space. We had an awesome Christmas dinner that was tied into our children's musical this past December. And we had about 160 folks stay for dinner, even though it was kind of a rainy and sleety and snowy night. That fellowship hall was packed with those 150 kids. Not kids, 150 people altogether. This past weekend and the last 2 weekends, we have had a total of more than 650 people pass through the doors of Faith Church between Saturday night and Sunday morning. There's absolutely no way that we could ever host a genuinely church-wide fellowship event in our facilities. We just don't have the space. And then finally is parking. We currently have 165 parking spaces, and even on Sundays that aren't necessarily packed to the gills, I'm not talking about the Sunday before Christmas or Easter Sunday. On a given weekend, even on Sunday mornings, I go out after worship and there are folks parked along the grass, finding every nook and cranny to find a parking space. So we recognize that that's a fourth area of need. And looking at those 4 areas of need and working with Lundy Construction, we came up with what we have determined is our vision for the building that will help us do what we believe God is calling us to do. There's a lot of detail about that building in your magazine, as well as in some other things that we've shared over the last couple of months. But one of the things that we thought was going to be really important was giving us a visual of what that building might look like when we get there. And so we worked with an animation team, and we came up with a video that is kind of a 3D animated walkthrough of our whole vision for the building. And we're going to take a look at that now.
Let's take a glimpse of what the future holds as we go on this journey together. First up, our building expansion calls for a newly renovated lobby area. Here you will find a modern welcome center that will be for our guests and serve as an information hub for all the ministry activities around the church. There will be lots of gathering space and seating areas within the common space that is inclusive of our current narthex and fellowship hall. Next up, our parking. We will be bringing our total number of spaces from 165 currently to 246. It will be needed to also accommodate our new multi-purpose building that you can see pictured here, adjacent to our current facilities. With 16,000 square feet, it will be used for contemporary worship, student ministries, and recreation. Now, let's take a look inside. This building will be safe and provide a secure check-in for preschool ministries during the week and children's ministries on the weekends. There will be classrooms for children with just the right environment that is colorful and fun for the kids to learn about the love of the Lord at a young age. And finally, the multi-purpose space will be used for contemporary worship services with great sound and lighting, seating some 500 with a combination of chairs and round tables. Plus, we will have a full-size basketball court for student ministries and recreation events. All of these changes are going to reflect our excitement toward those around us. We are a church that is taking care of what God has given us to reach this community for Him. Let's join together and commit to our journey. As we move forward in the vision that God has placed in us, we will see great things happen here at Faith Church.
When I see that video, it excites me, not just because of the building itself, but because when I look at that building, even though those pictures don't show any people there, I can't help but watch that video and picture people in those seats. I picture people in those comfortable chairs in the large welcome lobby who are meeting for a Bible study during the week. I picture our son. Jeez Louise, I'm a sap. I picture our son sitting at one of those tables and coming to know Jesus the way that he already has these last 3 years that we've been here. I picture folks in that multi-purpose space inviting Jesus to come into their lives for the first time, or making a commitment to make their marriage work, or making a commitment to do whatever it takes to find the freedom from the addiction that they've been struggling with for decades, or to simply sit there and bask in the knowledge that they are loved with an everlasting love. That's what excites me, because I already see it happening, and I see people in those places coming to know and coming to love Jesus in ways that we can't even imagine. When I talk about God working in our lives in ways that we can't even imagine, I don't have to go back very far. When I was appointed to be your pastor in 2010, I knew that I was coming into a place that was exciting and already growing. We were coming from a church that averaged about 230 on a weekend to a church at that time that averaged about 370 on a weekend. And I had to learn a whole new way of being a pastor to go from a church of 220 to a church of 370. Like I said, this past weekend we had 600, not this weekend because we're still waiting for some online numbers, but last weekend we had 667 people worship at Faith Church. I can assure you that I'm still trying to learn a whole new way of being a pastor because of what God is doing. And that's in a facility that, quite frankly, restricts us all the time. Imagine what God can do when we have a facility that doesn't restrict us in the ways that we are restricted now. That's what excites me about the future. We're going to talk specifically now about the journey, our capital campaign that we launched this weekend as a congregation. And even though you, if you were with us in worship this weekend, you got one of these, I'm going to ask the guys to hand one of these out to everyone. You can't keep them, but we're going to walk through those tonight just to look at those if you haven't gotten a chance. Yes, please. These magazines were pulled together by members of our communication team. Our communication team has been led by Brett Hofstrom and Jamie Noggle, and Rebecca Sharp has been doing much of the actual graphic design for us. They pulled together this magazine, and another member of our congregation who owns a printing company helped us out by printing all of our materials at a deeply, deeply, deeply discounted rate that we could have never begun to hope for without their willingness to do that. But we're just going to look through this journey magazine page by page. I'm going to point out a couple of things that I hope that you'll look at in more depth over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll go from there. So inside the front page, you'll see it up on the screen. It's just simply a letter for me. As I was praying through what God was calling us to on this journey, the scripture verse that came to my mind was Matthew 4:19, when Jesus simply said, "Come, follow me." And the disciples did just that. And Jesus took them on a journey that they could have never imagined, took them on a journey that not only changed their lives, but literally changed the world because of what Jesus would do through them. And that's the kind of journey that I believe Jesus is calling us to. Jesus is saying, come, follow me. You're not going to have all the answers. You're not going to know all of the possibilities. You're not going to have resolution to all of the what ifs. But come and follow me, and if you follow my lead, I will take you on a journey that will stretch you, but that will impact Montoursville and Lycoming County, and I believe really the whole world for generations to come. And so that's just a letter to me kind of introducing this process and what we're looking at. If you go ahead and turn the page to what lies ahead on this journey, That's where you will see some more specific detail about what the big picture looks like. The big picture includes not only that fellowship, multi-purpose contemporary worship space, but the tearing down of our Fairview Drive wing for a 2-story children's building that will be safe and secure. If we're able to build the entire vision, it's a total expansion of 16,000 square feet for the multi-purpose space and 2 floors of 13,000 square feet in the children's building. But at this point, our vision only involves finishing that first level. The second level will be accessible by an elevator for storage and also additional expansion as we need to into the future. But that goes into more detail about what we're looking at for this project. The initial estimate from our partner Lundy Construction for the whole project came in at $5.2 million. And when we began to talk through the soft costs, things like AV needs for contemporary worship, lighting, sound, video, but also things like furniture. Not only in the worship space, but in the lobby, in our children's building. We came up with a total estimated cost of $7 million, and that's where we came up with that total cost. And then we needed to struggle with the question, what if we aren't able to build the whole $7 million building? And that's where the facilities design team came to the understanding that if we are only able to build a part of that vision, that we're going to start by building the multi-purpose space, because we believe that that contemporary worship space would allow us to expand our Sunday morning schedule so that we could have 2 contemporary worship services and a traditional worship service on Sunday mornings. But if we have 2 contemporary worship services, that would allow us to have 2 sessions of Hands-On Bible Club on Sunday mornings, which effectively doubles the number of classrooms that we have. It doesn't solve the problems with the crowded hallways. It doesn't solve the concerns about safe and secure check-in. And it doesn't provide us with a large gathering space where kids can worship together. But we thought if we had to pick one or the other to start at, that's where we needed to go. So more details on that page about the specifics of the building. On the next page, you'll see some questions and answers, some maybe, for lack of a better term, some frequently asked questions that we have talked through that may give you some answers to the questions that are already percolating in your mind. One of the things that we have decided as a congregation is that we must have at least half of the cash on hand before we break ground. While we do feel comfortable in potentially mortgaging half of the overall cost of the facility expansion, in order for us to feel comfortable doing that, we do still have to have the first half on hand. That means if we come to our celebration Sunday and we have $3.5 million in commitments that are pledged to come in over the next 3 years, we're not going to break ground in April because we don't have that money on hand. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, a couple more questions on that page. If you turn to the next page in your magazine, it's just kind of the history of where we are as a congregation. I thought that it's interesting that in just a couple of years, in 2016, we will celebrate the 150th anniversary of the first Methodist Episcopal Church here in Montoursville that is still standing on 400 Broad Street, but is now the home of Bilo Plumbing and Heating and the church apartments. But yes, no. I know it's still there, but I'm not sure that's the original Methodist Episcopal building. Well, 150 years ago, the congregation began. And there are just some significant dates. Just think about it. 2004 is less than 10 years ago, and that was when our first contemporary worship was held. 10 years ago in January, we held our first contemporary worship service, and see what God has done through that step of faith. I already shared with you we had 156 people worshiping in Faith Cafe. We've only even had Faith Cafe since December of 2010. This weekend, we had 195 folks worship with us on Saturday night. We have averaged right around 150 people on Saturday night, including children, ever since we began. And many of those 150 folks were not a part of Faith Church before we started offering Saturday evening services. One of the things that may be difficult for the average folk in the congregation to wrap their heads around is that when we began our Saturday night service on September 7th, almost literally overnight, our attendance grew by 120 people. That literally almost overnight, we had more than 120 extra folks who began to call Faith Church home. And that's because you and the leadership team took a step of faith in that direction. So every time that we as a congregation have honored God by taking a step of faith, God has honored us and brought more and more people to come to know Jesus through it. The next page in your magazine is simply just some testimonies of ways lives have been changed because of what God has done in Faith Church. So I encourage you to read those when you have time. That next page with the yellow background just shows some of those interior shots. And again, it's important for you to know, this is our tentative design that the facilities design team has worked with Lundy to get us to this point. This is not the exact building that we're going to build. We know that over the next couple of years of fundraising, we're going to continue to change as a congregation. We're going to continue to listen to input from the larger congregation, and we're not going to build the exact building that you have pictured here. But this is a way for us to move forward and say, this is what we believe God's vision for us starts to look like. One of the things that's important for you to know is that our current sanctuary remains intact. It will continue to serve as our traditional worship sanctuary. One of the hopes that I have as a possibility, and this is literally in Larry's head and nowhere else, this sanctuary is 44 years old now. And every time I sit down in the pew, I'm hoping and praying that it doesn't give way. And it's not just because I'm a big guy. There may be some cosmetic changes, some upgrades and renovations that happen here to make it more comfortable, more updated, and things like that. But this is going to remain our traditional worship sanctuary. There are no plans to change that at this point. If you turn the page, the next page has some pictures of kind of the history and what God has been doing through the generations at Faith Church. And then on the left side is talks about how we can all joyfully and generously give to God through the Journey Capital Campaign. It gives you some ideas because many of you are sitting here tonight and you're saying, we give to the church already. We may even tithe or go beyond tithing. I don't know where additional money is going to come from. So this begins to give us some ideas for where that additional generosity may be able to come from in our lives. Because this journey isn't going to look the same for you as it does for me and my family. It's going to look different for all of us, but it's a journey that I think God is calling everybody who calls Faith Church home to take. If you turn one more page, you will see two giving charts on the left hand, and on the right hand page you will see what our commitment card that we will be asking everybody to fill out as a part of our celebration Sunday on March 2nd is going to look like. But on the left page you see those two giving charts. One of the things that we realize is that for us to raise $1.5 million in a capital campaign over the next 3 years, needs to be celebrated as a very successful and faithful response to what God is doing in our midst. And for us to raise $1.5 million, God is going to have to move in the hearts and minds of his people at Faith Church. For us to raise $1.5 million, what Generis, our capital campaign consultants, and Tom Malzoni have determined is that for us to reach that $1.5 million level, we're going to need a couple of gifts in the $75,000, $100,000, or $250,000 level over the course of those 3 years. We're going to need many more in the area of anywhere from $3,600 to $50,000 over the course of the next 3 years, and then we need many gifts at $1,500 or less. If we are hoping to be able to build the entire vision, that entire building that we've begun to look at, and we need to raise $3.5 million to do that, that gift chart on the bottom of that page is a picture of what kind of gifts we need to be able to see, or what kind of commitments we need to see to reach that second benchmark. So we give you those as an avenue of prayer. Look over these. Pray through this process and talk it over with your family about how God might be calling you to exhibit extraordinary generosity through this journey. If you turn the page one more time, you'll just see our sermon notes over the next couple of weeks as we look through the book of Nehemiah. That's why we're asking you to bring this magazine with you every week so we can keep our notes there. And I know that it's not a lot of room for notes if you're a prodigious note taker, but it's a way to get started. And then on the back of that magazine, you'll see some important dates. I want to just look at every one of those. On February 17th, those who had been invited to be a part of our stakeholder summit, the core leadership of our congregation will come together on a Monday evening for an advanced commitment event. We want to be able to share with the larger congregation by saying, last weekend, 25 families who are a part of Faith Church and the core leadership of Faith Church got together, and they made commitments of so and so many dollars toward the overall journey. And to share that as a celebration of what God is already doing in our midst. On March 1st, Kendra Noggle and Jim and Beth Rodriguez will be leading us in a 24-hour prayer vigil. We're going to have, I think, Kendra, do you know, is it half-hour slots that we're looking at for folks to come and pray, or aren't we sure about that yet? 15 minutes. So we're going to be asking folks to sign up for a 15-minute time slot in that's 24 hours on March 1st to March 2nd to either come here to the church and pray over what God's going to do on our capital campaign, or pray at home, or just find a place where you can connect with God and be in prayer for this journey. And then on March 2nd, we will be gathering together as one joined congregation, all hopefully 700 of us or more, over at the major events team just passed out when I said more than 700. But hopefully we're gathering in one combined service at McCall Middle School that will be held at 9:30 on Sunday morning. It will be during that service that we'll have lots of special music, testimonies about what God's doing in people's lives. We'll have a sermon. Yep, you're not getting out of it that easily. We'll have time to pray. And during that service, we will make our commitments to the Journey campaign. And we will give that as part of our offering back to God that morning. Following that worship service, is it Hillside Catering? We'll be providing a wonderful catered meal to us. Also, that will be held at the middle school gymnasium. You'll be getting more information about that as an invitation in the mail. But we really want you to make sure that you put March 2nd on your calendar to be a part of that celebration Sunday. That weekend, we will not be holding an 8:30 service. We will not be holding a 9:45 service, and we will not be holding a Saturday night service because we want everybody to come together on Sunday morning at McCall. And then the last date on there is Easter Sunday, April 20th, 2014. We have determined that Easter Sunday this year is going to be the first day that we're inviting folks to give towards the commitments that they've made toward the Journey campaign. And so on that Sunday, we hope to receive the largest offering ever in the history of Faith Church. And 100% of our Easter offering will go toward that Journey campaign this year. So those are some important dates. So I've shared a lot of information. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to open it up for questions, but I just want to share with you what I'm asking of each and every one of you over the next couple of weeks. First and foremost, I'm asking you to pray through the process. A lot of times when we hear all of this information, when we see things like those giving charts, and when we hear that we're going to be asked to make commitments to a capital campaign, we go about it in our heads. And that's an okay place to start, but it can't end there. It needs to go through a prayer process. Barb and I have already been praying through this process. We've been having conversations about the process. We've been having discussions about the process and, quite frankly, how our lives are going to need to change over the next 3 years for us to be faithful to where God is calling us to go as a family. I don't ask anything more than that happens for each and every one of you. We're not going to all be able to give the same to this campaign. We're not all going to be able to make the same commitments, but we can make the same sacrifice. We can ask God the question, God, what is it that you want to achieve through me as a part of this journey that you're calling Faith Church to? If everybody who calls Faith Church home invites God into the conversation, then no matter what the final amount is in our capital campaign, we will have done what God has asked us to do, and I will be proud once again to be called your pastor. So pray through the process. Ask God what his will for your life is, and then third, be a part of that celebration on March 2nd. That's all I'm asking for you to do. At this point, I'm going to ask a little bit more of one of you. I've asked Ben McBeck to share a little bit about his story, about how he and Kate have been a part of this process and are going through this journey together as a family.
Hello. Bear with me. One-on-one, I'll talk your ear off, but I'm a little nervous to be up here. My story, as we've referred to it in our meetings, I grew up in a Christian home, Christian parents, a vibrant, growing, excited church that echoes what my Aunt Sherry said. Lots of young families, not so different from this church. It was initially what hooked me and Kate. Through that church, I was given a real strong foundation in Christ, which I promptly took off for college and abandoned a lot of what I said that I believed in. But throughout that time, I never didn't know God. I didn't know that He loved me in spite of everything I was doing and decisions I was making. Throughout that, because of that foundation, I had that in the back of my head. I knew what was right. Now I'm a father. Don't think about that very much back then. But one thing I recognized shortly after Kate and I had our first son, that neither one of our children are really ours. They're God's. It's our job to get them back to God. And that was really hit me strong coming away from the hospital, thinking I have to get this child back to whose he really is. So the only way I know how to do that is to provide him the foundation that I was given through the church I grew up in, the parents I had, the the surrogate parents I had, two of which are back here now, Mr. and Mrs. Hurd. This journey excites me because I know I'm not alone in this thought. The people that showed up to the summit, you people that showed up here tonight, obviously have a desire to provide that for not only our kids but other people in the community. As Larry said earlier, the building is really only a tool. But one thing I know is a tool is not effective unless it's in a hand. And made a decision, and obviously you guys are of the same thought that you want to be one of those hands. I want to be one of those hands for my kids, for your kids, and more importantly for people that we don't even know yet. But tools cost money. And up until a couple of years ago, I heard a sermon on tithing from a certain guy, I met Kate and I, we didn't give regularly. The collection plate came around, you threw a couple bucks in and went home. But for whatever reason, that Sunday, Kate and I drove separately, usually because I have something going on or got to pick something up or go to Lowe's or whatever. And I got home with the chart with the percentages that Larry's passed out for the day, and it was all in my heart all the way home. And I came up the stairs. I park on the basement door and come up, and Kate parks up above, and I came around the corner saying, "Kate, I want to talk to you about," and I looked on the refrigerator, and there was her insert about the percentages. So we decided at that point that tithing was really going to be hard for us, and but we wanted to continue to make steps towards the tithe. And the first year we decided to double what we gave, which again, admittedly wasn't huge, but it was a percentage. And within about 3 weeks, I think, after that, I got a raise, small raise, but a raise in that almost that exact amount, which just confirmed that God was working in us. I was really excited to step up again this year after the same type of sermon, and also this project came along about the same time. So it's really something we've been praying about and talking about what our part's going to be, but that's kind of where we're at right now. We've had discussions, as Larry said, but mainly just keeping it in prayer as to what we are able to sacrifice and do in addition to continuing our commitment to giving on a regular basis.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah. We have a couple of more minutes, so I just wanted to open it for questions that you might have. Questions about the building, questions about the campaign, questions about the process, any of it. Yeah, Barbara.
Are you planning? Whoa, that's loud.
No.
Are you planning on going outside of the congregation to look for contributions into the community?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. We've begun to talk about that with Tom Malzoni, who's our capital campaign consultant, and his experience is that the return for that kind of seeking the contributions from the community is relatively low. But if there are a couple of folks who are passionate about that and seeking community contributions, that there have been times when that has had a pretty strong impact. He told us about a story. He tells us stories all the time about what God does through these processes, and he told us a story about a church who hung banners outside talking about the capital campaign that they were on, and somebody from the larger community came in and they gave a significant contribution because they believed in what was going on at the church, even though it wasn't their church home. So we're certainly open to that. I don't know how much effort we're going to put into seeking that, simply because it really depends on kind of the personnel and folks having a passion about that. Kristen and then Philip.
Larry, has
a group,
Live streaming, so you also need to do this.
oh, really? Okay, I gotta pull it far away. Has anybody considered, will there be a fee for schools or outside organizations to rent the facility? Have they thought about that? And,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, was that it?
well, just in terms of, we're creating this tool to serve God, and we're asking all of our members to contribute, a significant amount of money, rightfully so, to get to this goal. But what, are we just going to open the doors? How do you envision that?
We don't have any specifics about it yet. Currently, what we have in place now is a building use policy. And for the most part, groups that are outside of the life of the congregation do pay some sort of fee if they're meeting here or if they're holding registration things here or things like that. So I would imagine that would be a part of the process because like many of you are aware, it's not just building the building. We're going to have expenses for staffing, for cleaning, for heating, for cooling, for all of that, and we're going to have the ongoing expenses of maintaining the facility. So my expectation is that outside groups, or even maybe the school district, that would contract with us to use the facilities. But here's where my heart is. If this is a tool for us to give back to the community, I would never want what we ask from the community to be a barrier to getting the community here. Yep. 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 Yes. Yeah. I once heard, in most churches, including our own, if you want to get married at a church and you're a member, you don't pay a fee to get married in the church. You may pay an honorarium to the organist and to the facility manager and to the pastor and things like that, but you don't pay a fee. If you're not a member, you pay $100 just to use the building to get married. For a couple of hours, the rental of this building. What I once heard is that if a church is serious about reaching out to those who aren't yet a part of it, it would charge that fee to members and not charge a fee to non-members. Now that makes my head spin a little bit, because if we're honest with ourselves, many of us, even who are members of a congregation, think, but membership should have its privileges. Well, that's not what the church is about. But we're not there yet. So we're probably going to find some balance between the two. But I would never want a fee or an expense to keep a community group from being able to use our facilities.
The gifts needed chart, those numbers are over 3 years, not once a year, correct?
Yes, unless you want to give $500,000 a year, Phil, nice. In which case I would send you a personal, handwritten, I would learn calligraphy. No, those gift levels, that's important that Phil pointed that out. Those gift levels are what we would need to see in place for a 3-year commitment. Because when we come together on March 2nd, we're making a 3-year commitment. That over the course of 3 years, we believe God is calling us to give this amount. How individuals and families choose to give that is completely up to them. The only way that this is, Barb, this is our 3rd capital campaign as a married couple that we've been a part of. The only way that works for us as a family is that we break that 3-year commitment up into a weekly contribution, and we give the same amount week after week, and it's 156 weeks. We know that is what works for us as a family. For others, it may work to give 3 one-time contributions over the course of those 3 years. For others, a monthly, however you figure that out is fine. But those gift levels are what we're looking at over the course of 3 years. Other questions you might have? Yes, the only people that will know the commitments that you make are Linda Davis, who is our business manager and who will track that giving, and the small team of people that she puts together. I will know. I have access to folks giving information as the lead pastor, but beyond Linda and I, nobody else in the congregation knows. And as a matter of fact, I'm not certain, but I think that even on that day that we make those commitments on Celebration Sunday, either we're going to ask you to fold it in half and put it in the basket, or we're going to provide an envelope to put it in and seal. Yep, this is a commitment between me and God. Any other questions? Again, I just ask you to continue to be in prayer for this process. Continue to trust God to speak to your hearts. Continue to expect God to challenge you and stretch you through this process. But also continue to expect God to be faithful every step of the way. If you have no other questions, I just want to close us in prayer, and then we are set for the evening. God, you are good, and your mercies endure forever. Every morning we wake up, and we have another chance at faithfulness. And even though we blow it every day, you never do. Your love for us has been the same since before the very creation of the world, and that there is nothing that we will ever do that will make you love us less or will make you love us more than you do right now. That truth gives us life. That truth gives us freedom. That truth is a truth that the world in which we live desperately needs to hear and to experience. I thank you for the ways that people are coming to know Jesus because of what you're doing at Faith Church. And throughout this journey, that's all we can ask, is that you would continue to form Jesus in us, that you would continue to show Jesus through our lives and our life together to our family, our friends, our neighbors, and our coworkers. And that through this journey, you would be honored and glorified. So teach us, touch us, challenge us, and change us from the inside out. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. On your way out, please take your child with you. Please hand to either Ben or Jeremy your Journey magazines. And if you didn't already receive a prayer band or one of the widow's mites as a reminder to pray throughout this process, they're available also in the narthex. Thank you again for being here.
We do have coffee and donuts in the fellowship hall and Faith Cafe. So come eat donuts and drink coffee.
And talk to your friends about Thursday night and Saturday morning's gatherings. We want to have as many people as possible come. So let them know.
Let's take a glimpse of what the future holds as we go on this journey together. First up, our building expansion calls for a newly renovated lobby area. Here you will find a modern welcome center that will be for our guests and serve as an information hub for all the ministry activities around the church. There will be lots of gathering space and seating areas within the common space that is inclusive of our current narthex and fellowship hall. Next up, our parking. We will be bringing our total number of spaces from 165 currently to 246. It will be needed to also accommodate our new multi-purpose building that you can see pictured here, adjacent to our current facilities. With 16,000 square feet, it will be used for contemporary worship, student ministries, and recreation. Now, let's take a look inside. This building will be safe and provide a secure check-in for preschool ministries during the week and children's ministries on the weekends. There will be classrooms for children with just the right environment that is colorful and fun for the kids to learn about the love of the Lord at a young age. And finally, the multi-purpose space will be used for contemporary worship services with great sound and lighting, seating some 500 with a combination of chairs and round tables. Plus, we will have a full-size basketball court for student ministries and recreation events. All of these changes are going to reflect our excitement toward those around us. We are a church that is taking care of what God has given us to reach this community for Him. Let's join together and commit to our journey. As we move forward in the vision that God has placed in us, we will see great things happen here at Faith Church.